The morning sky above Seoul turned silver as the alien ships broke through the clouds. Ambassador Jinwoo pressed his face against the observation window, watching the massive vessels drift down like glowing butterflies. His heart pounded so hard, he could hear it in his ears. "This is really happening," whispered Dr. Mingi beside him. She clutched her tablet with white knuckles. Her notes about first contact procedures suddenly feeling useless. The largest ship landed with barely a sound. On the prepared platform, steam rose from its crystalline hull as it settled, and Jinwoo could see his own reflection multiplied 1,000 times in its faceted surface. Around the world, billions of people watched the same scene on their screens, holding their breath. Section of the ship's hull simply melted away, revealing a ramp that sparkled like crushed diamonds. The first alien to emerge moved with impossible grace, its forearms swaying in perfect rhythm as it glided forward. Its skin shifted colors like oil on water, and when it smiled, Jinwoo felt both wonder and unease. "Welcome, children of Earth," the being said, its voice somehow speaking perfect Korean despite its alien throat. "I am Council Speaker Veltar of the Galactic Confederation. We have waited long for this moment." Commander Hunhwa stepped forward, his military uniform crisp. "Despite the humid Seoul air, we're honored by your presence, though we must admit we're somewhat surprised. Veltar's laugh sounded like silver bells in the wind. "Dear ones, we have been watching your little world for centuries. Your wars, your battles, your amusing conflicts, all part of growing up. But now, you are ready to become civilized." More aliens emerged from the ships, each more incredible than the last. Some looked like walking trees made of crystal, others resembled graceful sea creatures that somehow moved through air as easily as water. They all carried gifts-glowing devices that hummed with power. Medical equipment that could scan and heal with a touch, energy generators the size of suitcases that could power entire cities. "We offer you the galaxy," Veltar continued, producing a tablet that pulsed with inner light. It's unlimited energy, perfect health, worlds beyond counting. All we ask is that you put away your weapons. In the Confederation, we have evolved past such primitive tools. President Sujin approached slowly, flanked by world leaders who looked as overwhelmed as Jinwoo felt. Her hands shook as she reached for the tablet. "On behalf of humanity, we accept your generous offer," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the earth through cameras and microphones. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything in human history. The aliens presented gifts with elaborate flourishes, their movements so graceful they seemed to be dancing. They spoke of peace, of harmony, of a future where humanity would join a vast community of enlightened species who had left violence behind eons ago. "Your species shows such promise," Veltar told the assembled human leaders. "Yes, you are young and violent now, but that is natural. Every species must pass through this crude phase. We did long ago, before we learned better ways." Jinwoo watched the alien delegates examining human military equipment with what looked like fond amusement. They handled rifles and missiles the way adults might examine a child's toy soldiers, with gentle condescension and barely concealed pity. "Such clever little devices," commented one alien, a being that resembled a giant butterfly with too many wings. "It's quite ingenious for your level of development. Of course you will not need them anymore." Dr. Minji leaned close to Jinwoo. "You notice how they keep calling us children and primitive?" she whispered. Jinwoo nodded, his unease growing. The aliens were magnificent, generous, and clearly far more advanced than humanity. But there was something in their eyes a blind certainty that made him uncomfortable. They looked at humans the way humans might look at particularly clever pets. "Your military history is fascinating," Veltar was saying to Commander Heinwu. "All those battles, all that strategy and tactics, so much energy spent on such pointless activities. Do not worry, we will help you channel that creativity into more peaceful pursuits." "With respect," Hyunwoo replied carefully, "our military history isn't just about violence. It's about protecting what we value, standing up to threats, defending the innocent." Veltara's four eyes blinked in what might have been confusion. "Threats? What threats could there be in a civilized galaxy? We have had peace for 50,000 years. There is nothing to defend against. As the ceremonies ended and the crowds cheered, Jinwoo found himself staring at an old statue of Admiral Yi Sun-seen in the distance.
Ice.
The ancient Korean naval hero stood with his sword raised, his eyes fixed on some distant horizon. For a moment, Jinwoo could have sworn the statue was trying to tell him something. The aliens gathered their belongings, their gifts already transforming human technology. They spoke of schools they would build, of wisdom they would share, of the glorious future awaiting humanity as the newest members of their peaceful confederation. But as they prepared to leave, Jinwoo noticed something that chilled him. Not one of the aliens carried anything that could be used as a weapon. Not one of them looked like they had ever fought for anything in their entire existence. They had forgotten how to fight, and somehow that felt more dangerous than any threat humanity had ever faced. The world had changed in ways that seemed impossible just 3 months ago. Dr. Minji walked through the gleaming corridors of the Bisan Research Complex, marveling at how different everything looked. The walls themselves glowed with soft light, powered by alien energy cells no bigger than her thumb. Through the transparent ceiling, she could see the first passenger ship heading to Mars, its journey taking only days instead of months. Amazing, isn't it? Said Cephalon, the alien scientist working beside her. The being looked like a tree made of living crystal, its branches swaying gently as it moved. Your species adapts so quickly to new knowledge. Minji nodded, though something nagged at her. Tell me about your history, Cephalon. How did your people develop such advanced technology? The crystal being's light dimmed slightly, as if thinking, we have lived in perfect peace for 50,000 years. We learned long ago that conflict only holds back progress. Through meditation and shared consciousness, we evolved beyond the need for violence. But what about before that? Minji pressed. Every species must have had some conflicts, some challenges to overcome. Challenges? Cephalon seemed confused. We simply grew past such primitive behaviors. Your species will too once you learn to think collectively instead of individually. Minji made notes on her tablet, but the answer felt incomplete. She had spent weeks studying the historical records the aliens had shared, and they were strangely empty. No wars, no conflicts, no struggles of any kind. It was as if their entire history had been scrubbed clean. Across the city in Seoul, Ambassador Jinwoo was having his own unsettling conversation. The cultural center had become a hub for alien researchers studying human civilization, when today they were examining the museum's collection of historical artifacts. This is fascinating, chittered Mexai, an insect-like being whose compound eyes reflected the display cases. You have preserved so many relics of violence, these swords, these armor pieces, these battle paintings. Why do you keep such disturbing items? They're part of our history, Jinwoo explained patiently. They represent courage, sacrifice, the willingness to stand up for what's right. But the story's Mexai's antennae twitched with what looked like disgust. These tales of dragons and demons, of warriors fighting impossible battles, they're so dark, so violent. Why fill your children's minds with such barbaric fantasies? Jinwoo felt a flash of irritation. They're not barbaric. They're about hope, about ordinary people finding the strength to face extraordinary dangers. They teach us that even when things seem hopeless, we can still fight back. Fight back? Mexai's translator rendered the alien's tone as shocked. But why would anyone need to fight back? In a civilized society, there is nothing to fight against. That evening, Jinwoo sat in his apartment, staring at his collection of historical books and paintings. On his wall hung a reproduction of Admiral Yi Sun-sin's final battle. Great naval commander standing on his ship's deck, even his enemy. Arrows filled the air around him. The admiral's eyes seemed to bore into him, as if trying to convey some urgent message. His phone buzzed with a message from his daughter Hannah, who was studying at the new Mars colony. Dad, something strange happened today. We found some old ruins during our mining expedition, but the alien supervisors told us to stay away from them. They said they were just primitive structures, not worth studying. But Dad, they looked advanced, really advanced. Jinwoo frowned. Why would the aliens dismiss potentially important archaeological finds? He made a mental note to ask Veltar. About it when they met next week. Meanwhile, far from Earth, the Galactic Council was holding its regular session. The holographic forms of a dozen species flickered in the vast chamber. Their discussion focused on their newest members. The human integration proceeds smoothly, reported Veltar, his 4 arms gesturing to data displays. Their military bases are being converted to research facilities. Their weapons production has stopped entirely. Most encouraging. What about their cultural artifacts? Asked Gorthan, whose whale-like species communicated through deep, resonant tones. I've reviewed their historical records. So much focus on conflict and struggle. It's disturbing. Their entertainment media is particularly concerning, added another council member. These movies and books about heroes fighting monsters, such violent imagery, how do they function with such aggressive programming? Veltar's opalescent skin shifted to a calming blue. They are young, remember. All species go through this phase. We simply need to guide them away from these primitive impulses. In time, they will learn to think as we do. But what if they don't? Gorthan's tone carried a note of worry. If their violent nature is too deeply ingrained, then we will help them overcome it. Veltar replied confidently. We have the tools, the knowledge, the patience. They will evolve as all civilized species must. The council members murmured agreement, their discussion turning to other matters. None of them noticed the small probe drifting silently at the edge of their space, its sensors recording every word. The probe had been there for weeks, watching, listening, learning. Deep in its electronic memory, ancient programming stirred. The probe had been waiting for a very long time, and now it had found something interesting, something that had been missing from the galaxy for millennia. A species that still remembered how to fight. The emergency sirens wailed across Earth like the cry of a dying animal. Commander Hunwu sprinted through the corridors of the Geneva Command Center, his boots echoing on the polished floors. Around him, technicians and officers rushed to their stations, their faces pale with shock. What's the situation? Butch demanded as he burst into the main control room. Dr. Minji looked up from her console, her hands shaking as she worked the alien interfaces. It's chaos out there. Something called the Devourers just appeared at the edge of Galactic Council space. They're destroying everything in their path. The main screen flickered to life, showing a tactical display of the galaxy. Red dots marked enemy positions, spreading like a disease across the star map. Each red dot represented hundreds of ships, and they were moving fast. The Kepler system just went dark, reported Lieutenant Hyan from her station. That's 12. A billion people, gone in less than an hour. General Wu Jane entered the room, his face grim. I've been in contact with the other Earth Defense Forces. Everyone's asking the same question. What are we dealing with? Before anyone could answer, the air in the center of the room shimmered. The holographic form of Veltar appeared, but this wasn't the calm, confident alien they had come to know. His opalescent skin flickered with colors of fear and desperation. Humans, Veltar said, his voice cracking. We need your help. The Devourers have returned after 10,000 years of absence. They're heading straight for our core worlds, Devourers. Hunu stepped forward. You never mentioned them before. We thought they were extinct, Veltar admitted. They were the reason the Galactic Council was formed originally to protect against them. But they disappeared so long ago, we assumed they were gone forever. President Sujin joined the gathering, having rushed from her emergency bunker. What do you need from us? Our technology is still primitive compared to yours. We need support, Veltar said quickly. Medical supplies, evacuation ships, anything you can spare. The Council's military forces are being overwhelmed. What about fighting them? Asked General Wu Jin. Our fleets may be small, but we have trained soldiers, experienced commanders. Veltar's laugh was bitter and hollow. Fight them? Human, the Devourers, have destroyed civilizations that had mastered warfare when your species was still learning to use fire. Your ships would be space dust before you could fire a single shot. The room fell silent. On the screens around them, more star systems winked out as the enemy advance continued. The Velkari homeworld, with its beautiful crystal cities, lasted exactly 14 minutes against the attackers. "Show us their attack patterns," General Wujin said quietly. "Attack patterns?" Altar seemed confused. "They simply attack. They destroy everything. There are no patterns to study." Wujin frowned. "Everything has patterns. Even wild animals hunt in predictable ways. Show us the battle recordings." The holographic display shifted, showing footage from the destroyed systems. The Devourer ships were massive, black as space itself, moving in what looked like random formations. But as Wujin watched, his eyes began to pick out details the aliens had missed. "They're overconfident," he murmured. "Look at their formations. They're not even trying to protect their flanks. They're attacking like they've never faced real resistance." "'Cause they haven't," Veltar said desperately. "Council species gave up warfare millennia ago. We have no soldiers, no military tactics, no experience with combat. We're defenseless." Commander Hyunwoo studied the recordings with growing interest. "What about their technology? What kind of weapons are they using?" "Energy weapons, mostly," Dr. Mingi reported, analyzing the data. "It's very powerful, but they seem to rely on brute force rather than precision. Their ships are tough but slow to maneuver. Slow ships, predictable attacks, overconfident commanders," Hyunwoo mused. "General, I think we might be able to help after all." Veltar's four eyes widened. "You can't be serious. These are the Devourers, the galaxy's oldest nightmare. They've consumed entire star systems. Have they ever fought humans?" Wujin asked. "Well, no, but then they don't know what they're dealing with," Hyunwoo interrupted. "You said yourself that the Council's species gave up warfare, but we haven't. We've been fighting for survival our entire history." Outside the command center, Admiral Sungmin was already preparing the human fleet. The ships were small compared to the massive alien vessels, but they had been built with human military doctrine in mind. They were fast, maneuverable, and designed by people who understood that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. "Sir," his aide said nervously, "the aliens said our ships wouldn't last 5 minutes against these Devourers." Admiral Sungmin looked out at the fleet of human warships, their hulls gleaming with alien technology, but their hearts filled with human determination. "The aliens have been at peace for 50,000 years, he said quietly. "They've forgotten what it means to fight for something you care about." He turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to all ships. Tell them we're going to do what humans do best, we're going to fight back." As the fleet powered up their engines, something stirred in the depths of space. The Devourers had swept through the galaxy like a plague, destroying everything in their path. But they were about to encounter something they had never faced before. Species that still remembered how to go to war. The rescue ships fled through space like frightened birds, their hulls scorched and battered. Behind them, the massive black shapes of the Devourer fleet moved like sharks through dark water, closing in for the final kill. The Zenthali survivors had nowhere left to run. Admiral Sungmin watched the tactical display on the bridge of the Inchin, his face calm despite the chaos unfolding before them. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements sharp and practiced. 17 enemy heavy cruisers confirmed, reported Captain Jisoo, her fingers dancing across the control panels, plus at least 50 smaller attack ships. They're not responding to any communication attempts. "Did we really expect them to?" Sungmin asked with a slight smile. "All ships, battle stations. Remember your training. We're not here to talk." The Devourer vessels were truly massive, each one the size of a small city. Their black hulls seemed to absorb light itself, bristling with weapons that had turned entire planets to ash. They moved with the lazy confidence of predators who had never known fear. Lieutenant Han looked up from her sensor station. "Sir, they're turning toward us now. But they're still ignoring the evacuation ships. They don't see us as a threat," Sungmin realized. "Perfect. Let them keep thinking that. All ships, execute Pattern 7. The human fleet suddenly scattered in all directions, their smaller vessels moving like dancers around the giant enemy ships. Where the Devourers had built their technology for raw power, humans had built theirs for speed and cunning. "Enemy-led ship is targeting us directly," Captain Jisoo called out as warning lights flashed across the bridge. Evasive action, Sungmin ordered calmly, and returned fire. What happened next would be talked about across the galaxy for generations. The human ships, tiny compared to their enemies, began to move in ways the Devourers had never seen. They darted between the massive vessels, striking at weak points and vanishing before the enemy could respond. The first Devourer ship to fall was the largest one, its massive hull cracking like an egg as human fighters swarmed around it. Enemy had expected their usual tactic of overwhelming firepower to work, but the humans weren't where they were supposed to be.
How are they doing this?
Veltar whispered from his command ship, watching the battle unfold on his screens.
The Devourers have never been defeated in open combat. Commander Hunwoo stood beside him, his arms crossed as he watched the tactical display. They're not unstoppable, he said quietly. They're just bullies who've never faced anyone willing to fight back. On the battlefield, the human ships moved like a pack of wolves, coordinating their attacks with precision the peaceful aliens had never imagined. They used the enemy's size against them, forcing the massive ships to fire on each other in their confusion. Target their engines, Admiral Sungmin commanded. Don't try to match their firepower, outsmart them. The Incheon dove beneath a Devourer cruiser, its weapons carving through the enemy's hull like a knife through paper. Around them, other human ships executed similar maneuvers, each one striking at exactly the right moment. Dr. Minji monitoring the battle from Earth, watched in amazement as the tactical display showed the tide turning. They're actually winning, she breathed. The humans are beating the Devourers, the enemy fleet, so confident just minutes before, began to break apart. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia found themselves outmaneuvered and outfought by vessels a fraction of their size. The Devourers had grown lazy in their dominance, forgetting that true strength comes not from size, but from skill. Impossible, Veltar said, his four eyes wide with disbelief. In 3,000 years, no one has ever defeated them in direct combat. You've been at peace for 50,000 years, Hyunwoo replied, his voice carrying the weight of human history. We've been at war for 50,000 years. There's a difference. The last Devourer ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its destruction visible from 3 star systems away. The human fleet regrouped, their casualties remarkably light considering the odds they had faced. Admiral Sungmin looked at his tactical display with satisfaction. All ships report status. Minimal damage across the fleet, came the reply. 2 ships with minor hull breaches, no casualties. Across the galaxy, word of the impossible victory spread like wildfire. The Devourers, the ancient nightmare that had haunted civilizations for millennia, had been defeated by the newest members of the Galactic Council. But this was just the beginning. As news of the human victory reached other battle zones, more Devourer fleets found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered. The humans didn't just fight, they fought smart, using tactics and strategies that the peaceful aliens had forgotten existed. They're learning, Veltar observed, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. The Devourers are adapting their tactics. So are we, Hyunwoo replied grimly. But we've had more practice. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had known for thousands of years, that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be very, very good at war. The Devourers had awakened something they didn't understand, and now they would face the consequences of challenging a species that had never forgotten how to fight. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the 2 fleets faced each other in the vast emptiness of the Andromeda Reach. On one side, 1,000 Devourer ships stretched across space like a black tide, their hulls gleaming with the reflected light of distant suns. On the other, 300 human vessels hung in formation. Tiny by comparison, but burning with fierce determination, Captain Jisoo studied the tactical display on the bridge of the Incheon, her face pale as she counted the enemy ships. The numbers aren't good. We're outnumbered more than 3 to 1. Admiral Sungmin stood calmly beside her, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. When have the numbers ever been in our favor, Captain? Signal all ships today we finish what they started. The Devourer fleet began to move, their massive vessels advancing in perfect formation. For 10,000 years, they had swept across the galaxy like a plague, consuming entire civilizations and leaving only darkness behind. They had never known defeat, never tasted fear, never faced an enemy that refused to run, but they had never fought humans before. "All ships, prepare for final protocol," Sungmin commanded into his communicator. Round him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and deadly. These were the descendants of warriors who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. The human fleet suddenly burst into motion, their ships moving like a school of fish through dark water. They had learned from every battle, absorbed the wisdom of every conflict humanity had ever fought. They were the children of those who had stared dragons in the eye and refused to blink. The first exchange of fire lit up the void like a deadly fireworks display. Devourer weapons designed to crack planets unleashed their fury on the human fleet. But the humans were no longer where they had been a moment before. "They're trying to surround us," reported Lieutenant Haeon from her station. "Let them try," Sungmin replied with a grim smile. "Execute pattern Omega." The human ships scattered in all directions, then suddenly converged on the Devourer formation from dozens of different angles. It was like watching a perfect dance, each vessel knowing exactly where to be at exactly the right moment. The enemy fleet, so confident just moments before, began to crumble. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia found themselves outmaneuvered and outfought by vessels they had dismissed as primitive. The Devourers had grown arrogant in their dominance, forgetting that true strength comes not from size but from the will to fight. "Impossible," whispered the Devourer fleet commander from his massive flagship. "They are insects. How can insects defeat us?" The answer came in the form of a dozen human fighters that suddenly appeared around his ship like angry wasps. The massive dreadnought, 10,000 years old, and the terror of countless worlds, found its shields failing under concentrated fire. "Target their command ship," Sungmin ordered. "End this." The human fleet converged on the Devourer flagship like a closing fist. The massive vessel, larger than some space stations, tried desperately to bring its planet-killing weapons to bear. But the human ships were too fast, too clever, too determined. Dr. Minji watched the battle from Earth, her hands pressed to her mouth in amazement. "They're actually doing it," she whispered. "They're winning." On the bridge of the Inchin, Admiral Sungmin opened a communication channel to the enemy flagship. "Devourer command ship, this is Admiral Sungmin of the human fleet. Surrender now, and your war is over." The response was a final desperate blast of energy that scorched empty space harmlessly. The Devourer commander had chosen death over defeat, and his massive ship exploded in a cascade of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Silence fell across the galaxy as the news spread. The Devourers, the ancient nightmare that had haunted civilizations for millennia, were no more. The last of their ships drifted as burning wreckage. Their reign of terror finally ended in the council chambers. Species from across the galaxy looked at their human allies with new eyes. Veltar, the alien who had once dismissed human weapons as primitive toys, now understood what they had truly welcomed into their confederation. "We owe you a debt we can never repay," he said quietly, his 4 eyes reflecting a respect that hadn't been there before. Ambassador Jinwoo, standing among the assembled representatives, shook his head. "You don't owe us anything. But perhaps next time, you'll remember sometimes the best way to keep the peace is to be very, very good at war." As the human fleet returned to Earth, their holds filled with rescued survivors from a dozen worlds, the galaxy began to understand what they had truly gained. Not just another peaceful species to join their confederation, but the guardians they had never known they needed. The legends had been fulfilled. The dragons in human stories weren't. The monsters, they were the obstacles that had forged humanity into something unique in the galaxy. The myths of heroes standing against impossible odds weren't fantasies. They were the genetic memory of a species that had never learned to surrender. Humanity had finally found their place among the stars. Not as students of a peaceful galaxy, but as its protectors. Monsters in the darkness had been vanquished, and the galaxy was safe once more. The legends lived on, written now in starlight and victory.